Jimmy's life on the surface seems to be a picture of success. He has a stable job, a solid education, and appears to have everything together. Yet beneath this external appearance, Jimmy is weighed down by an undercurrent of suffering, one rooted in feelings of fear, guilt, resentment, and anger toward his past, particularly his family, whom he blames for choices that, in his mind, derailed his life. His journey reflects a deeper struggle with existential questions and emotional turmoil as he fixates on how life should have unfolded. Jimmy's desire to escape his pain and confusion sets him on a path to explore different ways of understanding reality, particularly through the lens of dualism, semi-dualism, non-dualism, and pure non-dualism. Dualism, the starting point for many, is the worldview that divides life into opposing categories: right and wrong, good and bad, self and other. Jimmy's suffering stems from this dualistic mindset, where his attachment to past events and his need to assign blame create a clear division between himself and his circumstances. In dualism, we see the world through separation, and this separation fuels the sense of conflict and dissatisfaction. However, as Jimmy delves deeper, he encounters semi-dualism, a perspective that softens the hard boundaries of dualism, but still acknowledges the play of opposites. Here, Jimmy begins to see the interconnectedness of events, realizing that while his pain may seem rooted in the past, it also offers an opportunity for growth and understanding. Semi-dualism introduces a sense of balance between the dualistic view of life and the possibility of something beyond it. As his search for peace intensifies, Jimmy steps into the realm of non-dualism, a philosophy that challenges the very notion of separateness. Non-dualism teaches that the divisions we experience between self and other, success and failure, past and present, are illusions created by the mind. In this space, Jimmy begins to question the story he has been telling himself. Could it be that his suffering is not a result of external circumstances, but of his attachment to these mental divisions? Non-dualism invites him to look beyond the surface of his pain and explore the underlying unity of all things. Finally, Jimmy is introduced to the concept of pure non-dualism, which transcends even the subtle distinctions of semi-dualism and non-dualism. Pure non-dualism points to an experience of reality that is undivided, where there is only one essence, one being, and all distinctions fall away. In this state, suffering dissolves entirely, not because of external changes, but because there is no longer a self to suffer. Jimmy realizes that the end of suffering lies not in resolving his past or changing his external circumstances, but in recognizing the inherent unity of all things, past, present, and future, self and other, joy and pain. In this exploration, Jimmy's journey mirrors the timeless human quest for freedom from suffering. Through the lenses of dualism, semi-dualism, non-dualism, and pure non-dualism, he navigates the tension between separateness and unity, searching for the place where suffering ends and peace prevails. His story is a reflection of the deeper questions we all face. How do we reconcile our pain? How do we move beyond the mind's divisions? And how do we find true happiness in a world that so often seems divided?
Who am I, really?
That's the essential question, Jimmy. The kind of question that, when truly explored, can shift the course of your entire life. When you ask, who am I really? You're not just looking for surface level answers. You're searching for the core of your existence. Are you simply the person with a name, a job, a set of relationships? Or is there something deeper, more fundamental to who you are? What are you when all the external layers, the roles, the achievements, the failures are peeled away?
I feel completely separate from everything and everyone. It's like there's a distinct line between me and everything else. My sense of self is tightly connected to my body, my thoughts, and my emotions. I experience the world as a collection of objects, people, and events that are external to me, and I'm just one individual navigating through it all.
And in that separation, what shapes your identity?
My identity feels tied to my personal history, my successes, my failures, my relationships. I'm constantly thinking about who I am based on what I've done and how people see me. Everything I do seems to reinforce this I. I define myself by my career, my achievements, my role as a friend, a partner, or even by my mistakes. It feels like my entire life is filtered through this sense of being me.
That's the heart of dualism, the construction of identity through separation. You define yourself by the roles you play and the experiences you have, all of which seem distinct from others. But this also brings a sense of limitation, doesn't it?
Definitely. I constantly feel the need to protect this identity. It's like I'm always measuring myself against others, whether I'm doing well or failing, whether I'm liked or disliked. I feel this pressure to succeed and prove myself, which keeps me in a state of comparison. There's this underlying feeling that I need to maintain control, and that control is hard to hold on to.
In dualism, control becomes central. The ego, which is rooted in this idea of separation, is always trying to maintain stability to ensure its survival. But what happens when that control is threatened?
It feels like I'm under attack. If something goes wrong, if I fail at something or face rejection, it feels personal, like it's an attack on me. It makes me defensive, vulnerable, and even isolated. My mind starts to replay past events where I've been hurt, or it worries about the future, trying to prevent more pain from happening. It's exhausting because I'm always either reliving the past or trying to anticipate what's coming next.
That's the nature of the dualistic mindset. It traps you in time. You're either caught in the past or projecting into the future, but rarely grounded in the present moment. How does that affect your experience of life?
It makes it hard to just be. My mind is constantly analyzing, strategizing, and planning. I'm always thinking about what I need to do next to keep things under control, or I'm looking back and wondering why things turned out the way they did. I rarely feel present because I'm too consumed by what has been or what will be. And honestly, it creates a lot of inner conflict. I feel like I'm in a constant battle with myself and the world.
Yes, dualism inherently creates that conflict within yourself and with others. The ego, constantly seeking validation, tries to separate me from you, reinforcing the illusion of division. You end up in competition, striving for approval, for success, for happiness. But in doing so, you perpetuate a cycle of comparison and conflict. How do you experience this in your relationships?
My interactions often feel transactional. I'm always considering what I can gain or lose in any given situation. It's not that I want to be selfish, but it feels like a natural reaction when I think of myself as separate from others. I'm constantly evaluating how others see me, whether I'm measuring up, and how I can protect my position. It creates tension, especially when I feel like my identity or my worth is being questioned.
That's a natural outcome of dualism, this transactional approach to relationships and the world. When we see ourselves as separate, every interaction feels like a negotiation. But does that sense of separation create a deeper sense of disconnection?
Yes, absolutely. I often feel like I'm alone in my struggles, even though I'm surrounded by people. It's like there's this invisible wall between me and others. I'm always thinking about how I'm perceived, what I need to say or do to maintain my sense of self, and that creates a lot of inner tension. I feel disconnected from people, even when I'm with them. It's hard to feel genuinely connected when I'm so focused on protecting my own image.
Dualism reinforces that disconnection because it's based on the belief that I and others are fundamentally separate. And with that comes suffering. How does suffering show up for you in this dualistic mindset?
Suffering feels very immediate and personal. It's like any pain or failure strikes at the core of who I am. My ego takes everything personally. So even small setbacks feel like big threats to my identity. The fear of loss, rejection, or failure is constant. And because I identify so strongly with my body, thoughts, and emotions, every challenge feels like something I have to face alone. It feels isolating, and I get stuck in cycles of worry, guilt, and fear.
That's the trap of dualism. The ego's need for validation creates a vulnerability to suffering. The more you identify with this separate self, the more deeply you feel the pain of rejection, loss, and conflict. Your sense of self worth is tied to external factors, which means any disturbance in those external factors destabilizes you. But do you see the pattern here?
Yes, I can see it now. The more I cling to this sense of separation, the more suffering it creates. It's like I'm constantly chasing something outside myself to fill a gap that can never really be filled. Even when I achieve something or gain validation, it's fleeting. I feel good for a moment, but then the need returns and the cycle starts all over again.
Exactly. The illusion of dualism is that you must constantly seek happiness, success, and approval outside of yourself. But it's never truly satisfying because the deeper truth is that you are not separate from the world. The ego is constantly trying to defend a false sense of identity, and that creates tension and suffering. How does that realization sit with you?
It's unsettling because it means that so much of what I've been striving for is based on an illusion. But at the same time, it feels like the first step toward freedom. I'm starting to see that the ego's need to separate and control is what's keeping me locked in this cycle of suffering. There's a part of me that knows there's something deeper, something more connected.
That's an important insight. The ego clings to dualism because it fears losing control, but it's that very clinging that creates suffering. By identifying so strongly with your separate self, you unintentionally build barriers between yourself and the world, between yourself and others. But now that you see the limitations of dualism, you can begin to explore the possibility of moving beyond it.
So, how do I begin to move beyond dualism?
The first step is recognizing the illusion of separation. As you've already seen, dualism creates division and suffering by reinforcing the idea that you are an isolated individual. But this recognition opens the door to a deeper truth, the interconnectedness of all things. As you start to soften the boundaries between I and others, between self and world, you begin to open up to the reality that there is no true separation. This is where the journey begins to shift toward unity, toward connection.
I feel like I'm ready for that, but it's hard to let go of the sense of me. I've spent my whole life building and protecting this identity.
That's understandable. The ego has been your guide through the world of dualism and it doesn't want to let go. But letting go doesn't mean losing yourself. It means expanding your sense of self to include the world around you, to see that you are part of something greater. The dualistic mindset has served its purpose, but now you're ready to explore beyond its limits. This is the beginning of a deeper journey toward connection, unity, and wholeness.
I can see how the separation has been holding me back. I want to step into something more connected, something more peaceful.
And you will. The awareness you've gained is already the first step. Moving beyond dualism takes time, but with each insight, the boundaries between you and the world will begin to dissolve, revealing the deeper truth of unity that has always been there, waiting to be seen.
Who am I, really? I mean, I feel like I'm still me, but something's shifting. It's like the separation I used to feel between myself and everything else is starting to blur.
That's the beginning of semi dualism. You're still experiencing yourself as an individual with your own desires, fears, and responsibilities. But now there's an emerging awareness that you're part of something larger, a recognition that the walls between you and the rest of the world are thinning. What does that feel like for you?
It's like I'm still me, but the boundaries between me and the world around me aren't as rigid. I used to see myself as separate, with my own goals, successes, and struggles, but now I'm starting to feel connected to something bigger. It's as if I'm part of a vast web, whether it's nature, my community, or even the universe. My ego is still there, but it doesn't dominate as much. I'm becoming aware of this interconnectedness beneath the surface.
That's a significant shift. You haven't lost your sense of self, but you're seeing beyond the confines of individual identity. You're Jimmy, but your identity is expanding. The boundaries between self and other are softening, and you're beginning to experience the unity that underlies everything. How does this change your perception of the world?
It's dramatic, actually. Before, I saw life as a series of contrasts: good versus bad, success versus failure, self versus other. Everything felt so divided. But now I can see the beauty in the diversity of it all, without needing to categorize everything. I still see differences among people, nature, and situations, but I understand that those differences are just expressions of a deeper unity. It's like seeing individual waves, but knowing they're all part of the same ocean.
Beautifully put. In semi-dualism, you can honor the uniqueness of each wave without losing sight of the ocean. You're starting to recognize that each person, each situation, carries the same essence that connects all of life. How does this awareness affect your relationship with suffering?
It's evolving, for sure. I used to view my pain and challenges as something I had to carry alone, as if they were exclusively mine. But now I see suffering as part of the shared human experience. When I'm in pain, it feels like I'm tapping into something much larger, something that we all go through. That realization has softened my heart. I feel more compassionate, not just toward others, but toward myself too. The boundaries between my suffering and your suffering are dissolving.
That's the gift of interconnectedness. It breeds compassion. When you realize that your suffering isn't isolated, that it's part of the collective experience of being human, it becomes less of a burden. You're no longer alone in your pain, and that sense of connection creates empathy both for others and for yourself. How do you feel about this new way of relating to suffering?
It's comforting, actually. I don't feel as isolated in my struggles anymore. There's a sense of unity even in moments of hardship. When I feel pain, I see it as part of the flow of life, rather than something that's happening just to me. And when I see others in pain, I'm more inclined to offer support, because their suffering doesn't feel separate from my own. It's all connected.
Exactly. You're starting to see yourself as part of a larger web of existence. You're still navigating life as Jimmy with your own desires and challenges, but now you understand that your actions, thoughts, and energy ripple out and affect the whole. How does this change how you engage with the world?
It's changing everything. I used to be so focused on my individual self, on protecting my interests, my desires, my sense of success or failure. But now I see that I'm part of a shared energy, a shared consciousness. My personal struggles and suffering are part of a collective experience. I feel more compassion for myself, but also for others, because we're all connected in this web. I'm less focused on what I can get out of life and more on how I can contribute to this larger whole.
That's the essence of semi dualism. The individual you is still there, but your sense of self is expanding to include the greater whole. But with this new awareness, do you ever feel the pull of your old desires or fears?
Definitely. There's still tension. Sometimes I feel pulled back into wanting to assert my individuality, my personal ambitions, my need for validation. It's like part of me still wants to hold on to that sense of me as separate. But another part of me recognizes the fleeting nature of those desires when I think about the bigger picture, about how interconnected we all are.
That's the natural tension of semi dualism. You're seeing two perspectives, being an individual and being part of the collective. The ego hasn't disappeared, it's still there, sometimes resisting this new awareness. But even in those moments, can you sense that the tension itself is part of your growth?
Yes, I can. When I feel that tension, I realize it's part of the process. It's a sign that I'm evolving, that I'm expanding into a deeper understanding of who I am. I'm starting to embrace the challenge rather than resist it. It's like learning to live in two worlds at once, the world of individual desires and the world of interconnectedness.
Exactly. That tension is not something to fear, but something to embrace. It's a sign that you're growing into a deeper truth, expanding beyond the limitations of dualism. Moving forward, you'll continue to embrace these perspectives, but over time, the boundaries between yourself and others will continue to dissolve. What do you hope for as you continue this journey?
I hope to experience more moments where the boundaries disappear completely, where I can fully embrace the interconnectedness that I'm beginning to feel. I know the individual me will always be there, but I want to live more from a place of connection, compassion, and shared consciousness. I look forward to a time when the tension between individuality and unity eases, and I can live more fully from this new awareness.
And you will. As you continue to deepen your understanding of semi dualism, the boundaries will soften even more, and your experience of interconnectedness will become more natural. The path forward is one of compassion, connection, and shared consciousness. You are on that journey now. The guidance is within you, always. You're simply beginning to see it more clearly now. Keep exploring, keep expanding. The deeper truth of unity is always there, waiting to be revealed.
I feel like I'm moving beyond the sense of being just me, but I'm struggling to fully grasp who I am.
You are entering the realm of non dualism. In non dual awareness, the separate sense of I, the individual self you've always identified with, begins to dissolve. The me you once knew, with all its memories, achievements, and failures, is seen as a temporary role, a character in the play of life. Who you truly are is not a separate entity moving through a world of objects, but the same awareness that permeates all things. Can you sense that shift?
Yes, I can feel that shift. It's like the boundaries that once defined me are becoming blurry. The identity I once clung to feels less solid. I'm starting to understand that who I thought I was, this person with a past, a personality, and a story, is just a temporary expression of something much bigger. It's unsettling, but also freeing.
That's a profound realization. In non dualism, the sense of separation between me and the world dissolves. The boundaries between subject and object, between you and the divine, are seen as illusions. You begin to recognize that the essence of you is the same as the essence of everything else. It's no different from the essence of a tree, a mountain, or another person. How does this understanding change the way you see the world?
It's like I'm seeing everything for the first time. I used to view the world as a collection of separate things, but now I see that everything is connected. The distinctions are still there on the surface, people, objects, and events, but underneath I can feel that it's all part of the same fabric of existence. It's like seeing waves on the ocean. Each wave rises and falls, but they're all made of the same water. That's how I feel now. I'm just one wave in the ocean of consciousness.
Exactly. That's the essence of non duality. The forms and distinctions you see are real on one level, but they're not the ultimate reality. The deeper truth is that all these forms are expressions of the one unified consciousness. You are not separate from the world, you are the world, just as the wave is not separate from the ocean. How has this shifted your view of your own identity?
I used to think of myself as Jimmy, this distinct individual with a unique history and personality. But now I see that Jimmy is just a temporary role, a character in the play of life. My body, my mind, my personality, they're all tools through which consciousness experiences the world, but they're not who I really am. I'm starting to understand that I am the awareness behind all of these forms, the space in which everything arises and dissolves.
That's a deep and liberating realization. The identity of Jimmy is a useful concept in the world of form, but in the broader context of non duality, it is seen as a temporary construct. The true I is the awareness that exists before and beyond any personal identity. You are the consciousness that watches the play of life unfold. How has this realization changed your relationship with suffering?
It's changed everything. In the past, suffering felt so personal, like it was an attack on me as an individual. Every pain, every failure, every fear seemed to reinforce the idea that I was separate and vulnerable. But now, I see suffering differently. It's not my suffering anymore. It's just part of the flow of life. Pain, fear, and loss still arise, but they don't define me. They're just waves passing through the ocean of consciousness.
Exactly. Suffering arises when we identify with the limited, separate self, the ego that believes it is distinct from the rest of life. When you believed you were just Jimmy, suffering felt inescapable because it was tied to the survival of the ego. But now that you see yourself as the awareness behind all experience, suffering becomes a passing phenomenon. It's no longer personal. How does that change the way you meet suffering?
It allows me to meet suffering with more acceptance. I no longer feel the need to resist or avoid pain. I understand that all experiences, whether it's joy or sorrow, love or fear, are temporary. They come and go like clouds across the sky, but the sky itself remains untouched. I am that sky, that awareness that remains constant through all of life's changes. The urgency to escape suffering has faded, and I can face it with a sense of calm and peace.
That is the peace of non duality. The realization that your true nature is infinite awareness brings a profound sense of freedom. The stories and dramas of life still play out, but they no longer bind you. You can witness them without being caught up in them. Who are you now in this awareness?
I can say now that I am not just Jimmy. The body, the mind, and the personality I once identified with are simply temporary forms in the vast field of consciousness. I am the witnessing presence behind all of these forms. The I that I once clung to is not separate from the world or from others. In fact, the separation was an illusion. I am the consciousness that underlies everything. I am the awareness in which all of life unfolds.
And how does that understanding feel? Does it change the way you engage with life and others?
It feels liberating. I'm no longer bound by the limitations of my identity. I don't have to cling to the stories of my past or the fears of my future. Those things still arise, but they no longer define me. I am the space in which they happen, but I am not them. There's a sense of freedom from the fluctuations of life. I can engage with the world, but I'm not caught up in it in the same way. It feels lighter.
That is the lightness of being that comes with non dual awareness. The burdens of the ego fall away when you realize that you are not the roles you play, but the awareness that holds it all. Yet, even with this understanding, the pull of old habits and conditioning can still arise, can't it?
Yes, sometimes I still get caught up in old patterns. The mind tries to pull me back into thinking that I'm just Jimmy, with all his desires and fears. It's easy to slip back into that dualistic way of thinking, especially in the busyness of everyday life. But now I can recognize it more quickly. I see it as just a habit of the mind, not the truth of who I am. I can let go of it more easily.
That's the practice. Even in non duality, the mind may try to pull you back into dualistic thinking. It's an ongoing process of remembering and returning to the truth of your oneness with all of life. How do you feel about moving forward with this understanding?
I feel more grounded in it, even though I know there will be moments of forgetting. Those moments don't feel like setbacks anymore. They're just reminders to return to the truth. I'm learning to trust that this awareness of oneness is always there, even when the mind tries to distract me. It feels like a steady presence that I can return to again and again.
Trust in that presence. It is the essence of who you are, steady, unshaken, always guiding you back to the truth of non duality. As you continue this journey, the divisions of the mind will fade more and more, and you will live from this space of awareness. What do you hope for as you move forward?
I hope to integrate this understanding into every part of my life. I want to live more fully from this place of awareness, where I can engage with the world without getting caught in the illusions of separation. I want to experience life as a seamless flow of consciousness, where I'm not resisting or grasping, but just being. I know the mind will still try to pull me back, but I trust that this awareness is always there.
And it is. As you deepen in this practice, you will find that the awareness of oneness becomes more and more your natural state. The ego may still arise, but it will no longer have the same power over you. You will live from the freedom of knowing that you are the awareness in which all of life arises and unfolds. You are not separate from anything or anyone. You are the infinite, undivided reality expressing itself through every moment. The guidance was already within you. As you continue to walk this path, remember that you are the awareness that holds all of life. Trust in that truth, and you will continue to expand into the freedom and peace that comes with knowing your true self. You are not separate. You are life itself, the consciousness that is always present, always here, and always whole.
Who am I really? The more I explore, the more the question itself seems to dissolve.
In pure non-dualism, the question, who am I, becomes irrelevant because the very foundation of the question, the sense of a separate I, disappears. The idea of an individual self, a distinct entity moving through life, is seen as an illusion, a mirage. What you once identified as you, your body, your personality, your thoughts, fades into the background, revealing that there was never an individual to begin with. There is no separate I to ask the question or seek an answer. Do you sense this unfolding?
Yes, it feels like the me I thought I was, the person I've known my whole life, is fading. The sense of being Jimmy with all my memories, fears, and desires feels less and less real. It's like I'm watching it all dissolve. There's no longer a clear sense of me here to even ask who I am. It's just being.
Exactly. In the state of pure non-dualism, there is no experiencer, no subject observing an object. The division between self and world, between me and everything else, collapses entirely. What remains is just being, undifferentiated, infinite awareness. The I you once clung to is recognized as an illusion, something created by the mind. What is left when the illusion of separateness dissolves?
There's just this vast, boundless presence. It's like everything I once thought of as me has merged into something far greater, something without limits. There's no individual here anymore, just this awareness that is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I used to feel like I was a person looking out at the world.
That is the essence of pure non-dualism. There is no longer any distinction between the observer and the observed, no gap between me and the world. The experience of unity you once sought has now been transcended. Even unity implies duality, a subject that unites with something else. In pure non-dualism, even that dissolves. What remains is not an experience of unity, but simply the awareness of being without form, without boundaries. How do you relate to this shift?
But now it's as if the world and I are the same thing. It feels like freedom. There's no more need to define myself or explain the world. The search for meaning, for purpose, has ended. I used to feel like I had to figure out who I was, but now it's clear that there was never a me to figure out in the first place. There's just this one reality, and I am that.
Precisely. The search for self ends when you realize that the self you were searching for never existed. The journey of self-inquiry comes to a close because the very premise of the question is false. You were never a separate individual. The only truth is the one reality, the one awareness that expresses itself in countless forms. Now, rather than understanding this intellectually, you are experiencing it directly. What does this realization do to your view of the world?
The world as I once knew it feels like a dream I've woken up from. The sense of being in a world full of separate objects, people, time, and space has disappeared. There is no longer a world outside of me, and no longer a me inside looking out. Everything just is. The boundaries that once defined my experience, space, time, distance, they don't hold any weight anymore. There's only a vast, timeless stillness.
In pure non-dualism, the framework of duality collapses entirely. Time, which once seemed linear, dissolves into an eternal present. Space, which once divided things into separate locations, dissolves into the boundless field of awareness. What you're experiencing is the timeless ground of all existence, where there is no separation between here and there, now and then. How does this affect your relationship with everything that once seemed external to you?
It's like I'm no longer in relationship with anything, because the whole idea of me relating to something else has dissolved. Everything I used to perceive as external, people, objects, nature, are just different expressions of the same awareness that I am. There's no division between me and them, no subject to object relationship. Everything is simply arising and dissolving in this infinite field. I can't even say that I'm experiencing it, because there's no longer an I to experience anything. It's just happening.
And in that happening, you see the truth of pure non dualism. There is no longer any self or other, no subject or object, no experiencer or experience. What you once saw as solid boundaries between yourself and the world were only constructs of the mind. Now that the mind has quieted, you see that all distinctions were illusions. What does this realization bring you in terms of peace and suffering?
Suffering as I knew it doesn't exist anymore. It feels like suffering was always tied to the sense of being an individual who could be hurt, who could lose something. But now that the sense of me has dissolved, there is no longer anyone left to suffer. Pain may still arise, but it doesn't feel personal anymore. It's like a wave passing through, but the ocean remains untouched. The peace I feel is beyond anything I've ever known. There's no resistance to life, no grasping, no fear.
Suffering can only arise when there is a belief in separateness. When you believed yourself to be a distinct individual, you experienced suffering because the ego felt threatened, vulnerable, and incomplete. But now that the illusion of separateness has been fully seen through, suffering loses its foundation. Pain may still arise as a part of life, but it no longer belongs to a self. It is simply a transient experience passing through the awareness that you are. What does this bring you in terms of freedom?
It feels like the ultimate freedom. There is nothing to resist anymore, because there's no me to defend or protect. The things I used to chase after, happiness, success, validation, don't matter. The things I used to fear, failure, loss, death, don't touch me. I'm not bound by those old patterns of thinking. There's nothing to gain and nothing to lose. It's all just part of the same flow of being.
That's the freedom of pure non dualism, the freedom from the limitations of identity, from the stories and dramas of life. You are no longer confined by time, by the ego's fears and desires. You have stepped beyond duality into the infinite, timeless peace of being. Who are you now in this realization?
There is no longer a sense of I as a separate entity. The whole concept of me has dissolved. What I once called Jimmy was just a temporary form, a wave in the ocean of awareness. Now, even that wave has merged back into the whole. There is no longer an individual experiencing life. There is only the one consciousness, the one reality, expressing itself through everything. I am that. I am the formless, timeless reality.
And in that realization, there is no longer any journey to take, no goal to reach. You are not bound by the idea of progress or achievement. You are simply the infinite being, the ground of all existence manifesting in different forms. There is no separation, no division, no other. You are the absolute reality, the essence of all that is. How does this realization affect how you live your life?
It changes everything. The drive to achieve, to become something, has vanished. There's nothing to strive for because there's nothing missing. I used to think life was about reaching goals, overcoming challenges, but now I see that there was never anyone to reach or overcome anything. Everything just is. Life happens, but it's no longer happening to me. I am the space in which life arises and unfolds. Moving forward doesn't feel like the right way to describe it anymore. There is no longer a sense of time, of past or future. Everything just happens in this infinite now. I trust the flow of life, knowing that whatever arises within this vast stillness. There is no longer any need to control or direct anything. I feel at peace just being, without trying to grasp or understand. I am the awareness that holds it all. I understand now. There's no longer any separation, no longer any question of who am I. There's only this infinite formless presence that I am.
Exactly. In pure non dualism, the concept of challenges or obstacles disappears because those concepts belong to the realm of duality. There is no individual to face a challenge, no self to overcome anything. Life simply unfolds within the boundless field of awareness that you are. The peace you experience is beyond the reach of the mind, beyond words, beyond all concepts. And that is the ultimate truth of pure non dualism. There is nothing to achieve, nothing to grasp, nothing to control. You are the infinite, timeless awareness in which all things arise and dissolve. The stillness you experience is the eternal ground of being, the peace that passes all understanding. You are not separate from anything or anyone. You are the one reality expressing itself through all of existence. Yes, you are that. You have always been that. Rest in the knowing that there is no more searching to do, no more questions to answer. You are the infinite, undivided reality, the awareness that holds all of life, untouched by time, by space, by birth, by death, by anything. You are the timeless, formless essence of all that is. In that knowing, live from the peace that is always here, always present.